Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Nick Cosgrove and I am back with this week's No Filter Q&A. This is the episode where I answer all questions related to diet, training, and supplementation that I've received over the last 7 days from our in-house clients, online clients, as well as a few of our online followers. Remember, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. All right, let's get started with this week's no filter Q&A with question number one. Nick, how should training volume truly be adjusted as someone moves from beginner to advanced with their workouts? That's a good question. So, like anything in life, the more hours you put into your hobby, your career, your education, the better you're going to become at your hobby, your career, your education, right? So when you look at working out, you're trying to build a better physique. You're trying to improve your overall health, improve your overall well-being. When you spend hours and hours and years in the gym, you're picking up tons and tons of useful information to utilize at your disposal. Sets, reps, tempo speeds, supersets, circuit training, drop sets. These are all tools that people use to build muscle and to lose fat. Timing. How long should you rest between each set? Should you be taking out your phone between each set? Should you be talking to your gym neighbor for 5 minutes between each set? The more well versed and the more experienced you are in the gym, you know how to time your rest periods. So you don't need to look at your watch and say, oh, 45 seconds, time to go again. You just know. And that's one thing I always try to teach my clients is that we're going to go when you feel about 70% recovered. Okay. So the thing is, so when you start training more and more from beginner to intermediate to advanced, you become more educated on how your body's going to respond to the workouts. And you also know, because your timing's down, that how long your workouts are going to take. And you're getting way more done in 45 minutes now that you're an advanced trainee versus 45 minutes when you were a beginner. When you're a beginner, you're learning new exercises. You're learning form, you're learning technique, you're learning breathing tempo. There's a lot of trial and error. Okay. So that's going to take longer. So for someone who's brand new, they might get 6 exercises at maybe 18 sets for an hour workout. And that's great because they're learning how to do these exercises correctly. They're trying to gauge, they're trying to get a feel for what they're doing. But then the longer they spend in the gym, the more hours, the more days, the more years, they build up an arsenal of exercises. They have a vast vocabulary of exercises at their disposal because they're learning new exercises. Well, I would hope they're learning new exercises either from training partners or from personal trainers or maybe from even YouTube videos. Okay. But they're learning how to do different angles. They're learning how to execute different techniques, different forms, pronation, supination, neutral grip. So these are all things that people learn along the way. And that helps you build a better physique. It helps you build a better foundation. It helps you improve your health, your overall well-being. So to answer this question, it's not that you necessarily are going to start adding on tons of more volume as you get, more advanced if you're training. No, but you are going to be able to move more efficiently throughout the gym. I mean, I've talked about this in the past. So I've had people training me for 20 plus years who are knocking out 64 sets in 60 minutes. And they're not lifting light weights, but they've conditioned themselves over the years to do that. When they first started working with me, they weren't doing that. But because they know how to do the exercises, there's less time teaching how to do the exercises. There's less time guessing what weights they're going to have to do. And there's less time with trial and error, and there's less time actual resting between sets because they themselves are more fit. Okay. So you are going to add more volume, I would hope, because you're utilizing your time more efficiently in the gym. Okay. But again, it's not, and I talked about this a few weeks ago. It's not about how much time you're in the gym. It's not about how much volume you're in the gym. It's what you do with the time you have. Okay. So just because someone gets in 64 sets in 60 minutes doesn't necessarily mean that they're getting a better workout than someone who gets 30 sets in 60 minutes. No. But at the same time, you want to utilize your time to the best of your ability. So that person who's doing 30 sets is resting for 2, 3 minutes between sets because they're on their phone, that's not good. But if they're resting because they truly need it, maybe they did a heavy, really super heavy set, or maybe they did a PR, or maybe they did a drop set and they actually need the extra, 2 minute rest period as opposed to someone who maybe takes 30-second rest period. To me, they're still getting a good workout. Okay. So it's all relative to what your goals are and to what you yourself are doing in the gym. But I always tell everyone, rule of thumb, you always want to give yourself in the gym, in my opinion, not 100%. I always tell people give yourself about 85%. Don't train to true failure, train almost to failure. But you don't want to risk injury. You don't want to tear tendons, ligaments. You don't want to strain your joints. You want to stimulate the muscle belly. So, in order to do that, 85%, keep your rest period short, keep your intensity high, and that's how you're going to get results. All right. Nick, what are the biggest signs that a lifter is doing too much rather than too little? And how should they pull back without losing progress? So, in my experience, I've rarely, if ever, met anyone who's doing too much. Okay. I do have a few people on my roster, especially people who I work with online, who really push themselves when it comes to doing cardio. If I say I need you to do an hour of cardio, they'll do 2 hours cardio. If I say I need you to have 60 grams of carbs a day, they'll have 30 grams of carbs a day. And those people, because they push themselves so hard, and I actually had to tell those people, hey, you need to take your foot off the gas. But with my roster, I would say that's probably about 10% of my roster. Most people, I have to push harder and say, no, you can lift heavier. No, you can move faster. No, you can train more frequently. So most people, in my opinion, need to do more, not less. But for those people who are at risk of overtraining, okay, there are signs, there are symptoms to pay attention to. Okay. One would be mental burnout. If you are just mentally drained and you don't even want to go to the gym, the gym is something you enjoyed, and all of a sudden you're like, I don't want to be here. You're overtraining. You need to take a break. Okay. If you are constantly sore, and I've talked about the good soreness versus the bad soreness, but if you are constantly sore, like, oh, my elbows hurt, my knees hurt, my hips hurt, that's a good indicator that you're probably overtraining or you're training incorrectly, which is also leads to overtraining. Okay. So, how do you know if you're doing too much? Well, if you mentally don't want to be in the gym, that's a good sign that you are most likely overtraining, unless you really hate being in the gym. But a lot of people who go to the gym on a regular basis enjoy it, right? And so if all of a sudden you start hating the gym, you've probably overtrained. I remember when I used to compete, I would get like that every once in a while because especially after a show, I mean, God, there were times I was spending like 2 hours a day in the gym doing cardio and weights. That was getting ready for competitions. And when I was at the end of the competition was done, I was just mentally burnt out. I wasn't physically burnt out, I was just mentally burnt out. So I usually gave myself a few days break after a competition. Then I would return to the gym just for the mental break. But for me, how I avoid overtraining, and don't forget now too, I've been training for almost 6 months in a row now with no breaks since July 6th, and I don't feel overtrained. I still sleep well, I still recover well, I still have a good appetite. My are continuing to go up at my age, which is incredible. But the reason I believe that I'm not overtraining is because I train a different muscle group every day. So on day one, let's say I have chest. On day two, I have my back day, which is a row day. On day three, I'll have my shoulder day. On day four, I'll have another back day, which is a pull down day. On day five, I'll have an arm day. And then I'll either rotate that around and I'll do, okay, next day six, I'll do chest again and I'll roll on back, or maybe I'll do some abs, but I'm doing something every day. If I only have half an hour, maybe I'll do some abs and calves. Maybe I'll just do some cardio, but I'm doing something every day. But I'm not doing the same thing every day. So I'm not bench pressing every day. I'm not squatting every day. I'm not deadlifting every day. Okay. And that's important because if you do that, again, in my opinion, you're going to lead to overtraining. Okay. So if you want to prevent yourself from overtraining, my recommendation is to train one muscle group per day. Okay. If you're on a 3 day split, then that can be two muscle groups per day. Like if you're in the gym, let's say 3 times a week and not five or six like me, that could be something like chest and back day one, shoulders and arms day two, and then you could do legs and abs day three. Okay. And that's fine. But don't do like legs twice a week. Don't do chest twice a week. Okay. You could do a muscle group like maybe back twice a week, like I do rows and pull downs. That's okay. Or even if you did want to do legs, I would tell you to do quads one day and hamstring, glutes, and calves the next day. So you're not doing the exact same muscles though. Okay. So that's a really good way to avoid it. And also mix things up. Don't do the same thing because, I tell this to people all the time. Like, it's good every once in a while to mix up your routine. Okay. Your routine still has to make sense. But if you're going in and you're doing the same friggin' workout for 10, 15 years straight, that can get somewhat of a mental burnout for you. Even for me, like I'm pretty structured with my workouts, but every once in a while, I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna mix something up. I'm gonna take out an exercise, I'm gonna put something else in that I haven't done in years, and I'll do that for a few months. And it's just something new, right? So you got to watch that because I feel that more people are at risk of the mental burnout than the physical burnout. Okay. But those are things to definitely pay attention to because if you do start to mentally get burnt out and you're just like, I don't want to be here, that's a very, very risky road to go down because one day off can turn into 2 days off, could turn into 2 weeks off, turn into 2 months off. And then you get a lot of people who just stop going to the gym altogether. Okay. So you've really got to watch for that mental burnout. So keep the workouts fresh, keep setting new goals. Okay. So you have a reason to get up and go to the gym and don't train the same muscle group more than once a week. Okay. Nick, if you could only keep three exercises per muscle group for hypertrophy long term, what would they be? I would most likely stick to compound exercises, okay? Because I always think compound exercises, you're getting more bang for your buck per se. All right. So in the case of a chest workout, that would be an inclined barbell bench press, a flat barbell bench press, and I'd probably throw in some low incline dumbbell flies. Okay. For back, I would throw in bent over barbell row, so I get a nice free weight movement in there, a lat pull down, and then I would finish off with maybe a vertical seated row. The reason for that is if you're thinking like a bent over barbell row, you're using a supinated grip, which is an underhand grip. A lat pull down, you're using a pronated grip. And then for a vertical row, you're using a neutral grip. So I'm getting all three angles there. I'm working all three grips, and I'm working different areas of my back. Shoulders are a little bit more complex because to me, shoulders, you need kind of four exercises. But if I could only pick three, so I'm going to hit something for my anterior deltoid. So I'm going to pick something like a barbell military press. And I'm going to hit something for my medial deltoid. So I'm going to hit dumbbell lateral raises. But I also want to hit something for my rear delts. So for my rear delts, I might do bent over cable raises, or I might do bent over dumbbell raises. Or if I'm at a commercial gym, I might use a reverse pec deck, although I'm not really a machine person. So I'm making sure I'm hitting all three heads. But as a bonus, I'd like to do something for my traps. So I'd like to throw in some upright rows because I'm not a big fan of shrugs. Okay. And I've talked about why I believe shrugs are not a good exercise. I think they put too much pressure on the neck erectors and allow your neck to grow out like this. So it gives you the illusion that you have no neck, which I don't want that. So I never did shrugs. As far as bis and tris are concerned, I'm going to cheat here because I think at least you should have two exercises for your biceps. I mean, you have your long head and your short head. So if you're not doing at least two exercises for your biceps, you're making a mistake. So I would pick something like standing barbell or sort of standing easy bar curls. I really like easy bar curls. I find that they're great for the peak. And then seated dumbbell curls because I find with dumbbell curls, you're working each side independently. So if you have one side that's stronger than the other, which most people find their dominant side is more stronger than the other, they tend to pull more with that side when fatigue sets in. So that's why I think it's important to do a combination of compound with maybe some isolateral work when it comes to arms. Okay. But the other muscle groups, I stick to compound. Triceps. There's three heads of the triceps, so technically you should do three exercises for the triceps, right? But you're only giving me three exercises for arms. So if I were to pick for two exercises for the triceps, I'd pick with cable rope extensions, and then I'd probably pick up some easy bar skull crushers. So I get a cable and a free weight. And as far as legs are concerned, barbell back squats would be my go-to, 100%. I would also honestly, and I believe that to this day, I attribute walking lunges to how I developed such great legs when I competed. It wasn't just the squats, it was the lunges. And I don't see enough people doing walking lunges. They're such a great exercise. So I would throw in walking lunges. And for the hamstrings, I would throw in straight leg dumbbell deadlifts. Honestly, I found I got the best striations in my hamstrings from doing straight leg dumbbell deadlifts over lying hamstring curls on the machine or seated hamstring curls on the machine. So those would be my three exercises for the legs. And if we're going to throw abs in there, I like hanging leg raises for the abs. I think that's a great exercise. If you can't do hanging leg raises with your legs straight, you can always do them bringing your knees up to your chest. That's more of an easier movement and great for beginners. And then as you start to strengthen the transverse and the rectus abdominals, it becomes easier to do those straight legs again. But those would be the exercises I would do. Um, but hopefully you don't just have to do three exercises, and you can do a whole assortment of different exercises because there are 126 different muscles that you can train in the gym. Okay. I'm not going to get into all the nitty gritty of the heads and the tendons and all this stuff, but there are. So there's tons of different planes and tons of different ranges of motion that you can utilize at your disposal. So you're not limited to just three exercises per muscle group, or at least you shouldn't be. All right. Okay. Nick, how do you recommend balancing training to failure with longevity as we get older? Easy. Don't train to failure. Focus on longevity. So I talked about this last week, how, and I just talked about this briefly earlier in this episode, how I don't believe in training to failure, how I believe about training about 85%. Because the goal should always be to preserve your joints, your tendons, and your ligaments. And you want to stimulate the muscle bellies and not annihilate the joints. Okay. So by training to exhaustion as opposed to just train to failure, taking the muscle to exhaustion, but not completely depleting it. Okay. To me, that's going to allow you to last longer in this game. Because there's a lot of people that, when I used to compete, or even when I didn't compete, that I used to train, I would watch them and they were doing these one rep maxes or they'd be squatting 3, 4 times a week. And, it looked impressive. It did. But these people burned out. And it was usually guys, but they would burn out. Their knees would go, their hips would go, and then they'd stop going to the gym because who wants to go to the gym when you're constantly in pain? If you're dealing with chronic pain, do you really want to be in the gym exercising, lifting weight? No. So they stopped going to the gym. And the amount of people that I competed with who no longer even go to the gym, it's unbelievable. When I talk to them and I see them on Instagram or Facebook, they don't even work out anymore. And I attribute the reason why I've been able to last so long, coming up on 25 years injury free, is because of the way that I train. And I always approach my workouts very methodically. And I always listen to my body. So just because, and I talked about this last week, just because it's leg day, uh, if my legs, if for some reason, if I like, maybe I was working up on my rooftop deck and my knees are hurting, that happens sometimes when I'm doing manual labor. My knees are in pain or my hips are in pain. I am 40, so I'm getting older. I might not do legs that day. I'm like, you know what? I'm scheduled to do legs today, but I'm going to switch that up and I'll do chest and I'll do legs tomorrow or the day after. So I really listen to my body. I don't just say, well, today's leg day, so I'm going to do legs. No, I listen to my body. And then when I'm doing the workout, I really, really try my best to create that mind to muscle connection. And that's the take home message I give to every single person I work with is that when you're training, and you're lifting weight, you shouldn't be thinking about what you're going to be doing this weekend. You shouldn't be thinking about holiday plans. You shouldn't be thinking about work stresses. You should be thinking about, okay, I'm doing an easy bar curl. My mind to muscle connection needs to be in my brachialis right now. So I know I'm contracting that muscle. If you're in the gym for 45, 60 minutes, you should be able to have laser focus for that workout. And that's why I tell people no distractions, no phones. You don't need to talk to people. You can say a quick hello, but there's no reason to talk to people. You want to talk to people, go for coffee with them afterwards. Okay. So every time I train in the gym, I'm antisocial. I don't talk to people. I train. I put my headphones on. I just work out. Okay. And you have to have that laser focus. That's so important. Okay. Because if you don't, you do risk injury. And again, this comes down to the whole longevity factor. If you want to last, you have to approach your workouts intelligently. You have to train methodically. And you have to make sure that you're not doing stupid shit in the gym, which means you're not constantly trying to get PRs, or you're not going for one rep maxes, or you're not just doing it for the gram or TikTok because it looks cool. Because that's a good way to get injured, and that's a good way to end your career in the gym. All right. Okay. Okay. Nick, how should training change during a caloric deficit to preserve as much muscle as possible? Honestly, your training should never change, regardless of what you're doing with your diet. And I tell this to a lot of people that I work with when I do both their nutritional plan and their training program. If we're like in going into somewhat of a caloric deficit, let's say we're getting ready for a wedding, a photo shoot, bodybuilding show, and we are working a slight caloric deficit, which does happen from time to time. I've had people that, they do have to suffer for a week or two because maybe we need to get their body fat a little bit lower and we're on a time crunch. So what I always tell them, like, look, I know your energy levels are going to be low, okay, but I still need you to push as hard as you can in the gym, okay, which means that I don't want you to just be like, well, now Nick's giving me 50 grams less carbs per day, so I used to bench press 135, now I'm just going to bench press 95. Well, no, if you can still bench press 135, bench press 135. If you physically cannot bench press that 135, take it down, yes. But don't just take it down because you're like, well, now I'm getting in less calories. No, you still should be able to train with the same amount of intensity. You might not be able to train with the same amount of poundage at your lifting, but you should be able to train with the same amount of intensity. One thing I always tell people is when I'm putting them into a caloric deficit, I'm like, you have to be strategic with your diet. So I give you five, 6 meals. Every single person I work with, I've done this for 20 years designing nutritional plans. I always tell them, I don't care when you have these meals. I don't care what order you have these meals in. As long as you get 5 or 6 of those meals in within a 24-hour window, I'm happy. Okay. That's all about keeping me happy. Because if I'm not happy, they're not happy. So I always tell clients, I'm like, look, if you work out, let's say you're someone who works at 5 o'clock at night. I need you to have at least by then, because I'm assuming you're getting up by 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning. By 5 o'clock at night, I need you to have at least four of your 6 meals. Okay. I need that glycogen full. I need those muscle bellies, I should say, full of glycogen. I need you coming into that workout as strong as you possibly can be. If it's 5 o'clock and you've been up since 8 and you've only had one meal, we're in trouble. Okay. So you need to utilize food in this case. If you're someone who works out first thing in the morning, you're not, obviously you don't need to have 4 meals, but I would still like you to have something in your stomach, especially if you're working in a caloric deficit. Okay. And there are many people, and myself included, who've gone into caloric deficits over the years, getting ready for competitions, and I actually get stronger. We call it growing into a show. So that happens sometimes too. Okay. But you have to be strategic with how you implement your meals throughout your day that surround your workout. And that's how you're going to preserve muscle. Okay. But as soon as you start thinking to yourself, well, I'm in a caloric deficit, so I should be lifting lighter. No, because you're going to lose muscle. Okay, so don't think like that. I know I used to think like that when I first started training for competitions. I used to think, oh, well, now I'm getting ready for a show. Now my calories are like a lot less. You know, my carbs are a lot less. I'm doing more cardio. I'm more susceptible to injuries, which is true because you are losing body fat. And that's another thing to remember too is the leaner you get, and I'm talking about when you're getting into for men single digit body fat levels like 5, 6%, and for women, let's say 14, 15%, you become more susceptible to injury. You do. You don't have that insulation anymore. So keep that in mind too. If you are getting ready for a bodybuilding show, a fitness competition, a wedding, whatever you're trying to do, as your body fat gets lower, you become more susceptible to injuries. So it's very important to warm up and pay very close attention to what's going on throughout your workout. Okay. But that, again, does not mean that you have to cut the weights in half. That does not mean you have to train like a pansy. You can still train hard. Okay. So don't ever think to yourself, because you're in a caloric deficit, you have to take your foot off the gas. Your foot should never come off that gas. All right. Okay. Two more questions here. Nick, what role does exercise variation really play in hypertrophy? Is it necessary to stimulate or is it more of a distraction? Necessary to stimulate. I think you mean is it necessary to stimulate muscle growth? I think. Um, Okay, so and I talked about having some variation in your workouts. I think that's more important for the mental benefits, right? So you don't get bored of doing the same thing day in, day out. But there's something to be said about trying different angles, trying different planes and ranges of motion as well. And like I said in one of the other questions, using different grips, right? So talking about the pronated grip, the supinated grip, the neutral grip. Right. So you always want to utilize different angles, different grips, different planes and ranges of motion to help sculpt your physique. And that's what I've talked about in the past, how bodybuilding, and when I say bodybuilding, I don't just mean getting up on stage and putting a bunch of oil and tanner on all. If you're in a gym building your body, you're a bodybuilder. Okay. I hate to tell you, but you are a bodybuilder. That is the definition of a bodybuilder. You're building your body. Okay. So in order to build your body, you have to think of it like an art. a piece of art. Okay, you're sculpting it. Like say it's a clay sculpture. You're trying to sculpt it. So you have to assess your physique, and you have to be very critical of yourself. And a lot of people are very have a very hard time doing that. I know I did. So I used to use feedback from my friends that I would train with. I'd ask them, I'm like, what do I need to work on? I'd ask the judges, what do I need to work on? Because when you're doing it yourself, it's very hard to have a like an unbiased opinion as to what you need to work on. You might think I need to work on everything. But if someone is like a judge, for example, in my case, is critiquing you, they will give you feedback and say, hey, your legs are great right now. You need your back to catch up to your legs, though. So knowing that, I'm like, okay, I need to go into the gym. And what I'm doing right now is not working for my back. Let's say my back is lagging. So I need to figure out a new blueprint for my back day. In my case, I added 2 back days, right? But for someone else, it could be their legs. And maybe they've been doing the same leg workout for 2, 3 years. And now, like, yeah, but my legs aren't really popping. I don't really see definition in my quads. I don't have striations in my hamstrings. My glutes look a little flabby. I'm like, so now you got to look at what your leg workouts look like. Should you add maybe 2 separate leg days, like where you have the quad on one day and the hamstrings and the glutes and the calves on another day, right? And I did that in my when I used to compete as well. And I do that with a lot of women I train as well. So yes, technically there's 2 leg days, but they're 2 different muscle groups in the lower body. So you have to be able to understand how to put that together and not just think that it's about adding different exercises, but it is in a sense adding exercises that are going to work for your physique. All right. So you're not just adding exercises for the sake of exercises. If you're doing, for example, say your leg workout has always consisted of barbell back squats, leg press, hack squats, and that's it. And you've got great quads, but you turn around and you got no hamstrings, no glutes because you're always training your hamstrings maybe at the end of your leg workout. Well, by then, you're tired. So if I'm looking at someone's physique and I say, wow, you got great quads, but you have no detail in your hamstrings. I look at their leg workout. I'm like, well, you always put hamstrings at the end of this workout. Why don't we put hamstrings at the beginning of your workout when you're strongest? Your quads are already looking great. So even if you have to back down on the weight a little bit on your quads because you're going to be tired from doing hamstrings, who cares? Right now we need to focus on bringing your hamstrings up. And as a coach, that's what I do with people's physiques. When people send me their progress photos, I constantly look at their photos and I'm like, ah, yeah, you're looking really good and your delts are looking great, but your arms could use a little bit more size. Your triceps could use a little bit more definition. So let's tweak your program. Let's change this around. Let's add this in. Let's take this out. And that's what I do when I'm looking at people's training programs and I'm assessing their physique. The same thing I do with their diet. If I'm looking at someone in their photos, I'm like, yeah, like you could lose a little bit more fat around the midsection. Obviously, there's no such thing as spot reduction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower your carbs, increase your fats, and let's rotate your proteins. Okay, and so I'll play around with the diet, I'll play around with the training program, but I don't just make changes for the sake of making changes. Unless someone is really feeling mentally burnt out with something like, man, I can't keep eating the same food, Nick. You got to do something. I'm like, all right, you know what? I want you to have 2 cheat meals this week, right? And I'll do that for people sometime. If I can tell they're just mentally burnt out with something, I'll change something, or I'll change the workout. I'll add in a few new exercises because someone's like, yeah, it's just this is really bothering me, and I look for feedback too. Okay, so that's when you should add exercise variation in. If you're not seeing results with certain muscle groups, okay, or certain movements are bothering you, like I talked about in the past, how deadlifts would bother me. I don't do deadlifts. Every time I did deadlifts, and let me tell you, I did deadlifts perfect form, perfect technique. I had a power lifter teach me how to do deadlifts. And so I know my technique was on point. I mean, I still teach deadlifts to this day, but they never worked for me. Every time I did them, I didn't feel right doing them. And I always suffered for days after, whether it was lower back pain or strain in my glutes, strain in my hip. Hell, I had strain in my hamstrings. So it just didn't work for me. So I took them out. But even though deadlifts are a good exercise, they just didn't work for my body type. Okay. And so I substituted those exercises with hyperextensions. And I do a lot more bent over work as far as bent over barbell rows. And I do a lot of bent over T-bar rows. I do a lot of heavy barbell squats. So I'm working a lot of my core, my lower back already. But that's important. So you have to really pay attention to A, are these exercises working for me? Are they adding any benefit to my physique? And B, Are they causing any injuries or potential physical limitations? Okay. So that's when I would add in the variation to your program. Okay. And obviously, yes, if you are getting mentally burnt out with certain workouts, don't change up your whole workout. Maybe take out two or three exercises and throw in two or three other exercises, right? So maybe you're someone who goes to the gym and you always do incline barbell bench press and flat barbell bench press. That's part of your chest workout. Maybe take that out for a few weeks and do incline dumbbell bench press and flat dumbbell bench press, right? So you're switching up the piece of equipment. You're still working your upper chest and your mid chest, but you're just doing different exercises. Okay. So that's when I would make changes though. Primarily is when you're not seeing the results with your physique or something's causing pain, injury, potential physical limitations, or you're just mentally burnt out from doing the same thing day in, day out. All right. Okay. Last question. Nick, if someone only has 3 or 4 days per week to train, how would you structure their split for maximum muscle growth? Yeah, again, so this will really depend on the individual because I design workouts all the time for people. I design training splits all the time. Right now, I'm actually in the midst of designing three separate programs for three new online clients. These programs don't look the same because these people don't look the same. So I'm not giving them the exact same cookie cutter template training program, nor am I giving them the same cookie cutter template training split. Two of these clients are both going to be in the gym 3 days a week. Their training splits look very different. Okay. Why? Well, in the case of these two people, I have one client right now who's been has been working for years in the gym, trained for years in, years out, and now has hired me because I want to take my physique up to the next level. I'm thinking about maybe competing in my first bikini competition. So this person has been training for years. They're well versed in the gym. They're experienced. They have muscle maturity. I have someone else who's a complete beginner, doesn't even know a thing about the gym, and that's okay because I work with beginners too. But it would be silly of me to give them the exact same training split. It would be silly of me to give them the exact same workouts. Okay, because they're different bodies. First of all, they're different physiques. They're at different levels. Okay, and they have different goals. So it's not do this training split and this is going to get you the best results. Okay. Do this workout, this will get you the best results. No. Okay. So, yes, I could throw out there and tell you if you're going to do a 3 day split, go do chest and back day one, go do shoulders, biceps, and tries day two, go do legs and abs day three, because that is a template that I will tell most people to do if they're just trying to train for general overall health and well being. However, if your goal is changing, you've been training for years on end, and you've got a really good upper chest and you're really lacking in the back. Let's say you're a guy, and I see this a lot. A lot of guys have powerful chests, but they have weak backs and they start to go like this. Now I'm looking at a physique and I see rounded shoulders, I see a hunchback, and I'm like, ooh, we need to prioritize your back. Okay. So rather than maybe put back with chest, I might give back its own day. And I might put chest with maybe legs because maybe this person has really strong legs. Okay. So that's where you have to assess the physique, assess their level of fitness. Okay. Assess what their goals are, find out what this person wants to achieve with his or her physique. And that's how I design a training program and a training split for an individual. I don't just put out a cookie cutter template. Okay. So I can't really answer that question, tell you do this. I don't work with you. So I'd have to see your physique. I'd have to know more about your diet. I'd have to know more about how long you've been training. I'd have to know about any potential physical limitations or previous injuries or current injuries that you could have, right? Supplements that you're taking, medications that you're on. So it would be very ignorant of me to answer that question and just tell you do this because it could be wrong, right? So I only tell people what I believe they should do based on the information that they provide me. Okay. If I don't have that information, I can't really tell them what to do. I can tell them general recommendations. Sure. Like I said, that day three split, chest back day one, shoulders, arms day two, legs, abs day three. It's a pretty safe split for beginners or for people who are just going in the gym to train for overall health and well-being. But again, that can change. So it's not a one size fits all answer. I'll leave it at that. Anyway, that's it for this week's No Filter Q&A. This episode will be going up on Monday, December the 22nd. As a reminder, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, your workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, a happy holiday season, and thank you once again for watching my YouTube channel, for supporting my in-house coaching business here in Vancouver, British Columbia, as well as my online coaching business, which has really taken off this year. And I really appreciate all the support and all the feedback that I receive from each and every single one of you. And yeah, I want to wish you all the best. And I will see everyone before the new year because we'll have one more episode up before January 1st. But for now, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and I will see you all next week. Bye for now.